All right. You're all clapping. Does that mean you're going to be here?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll see. All right. Can I take my clap back? Is that what you said? That means I got to be here at 6:45? No, that'll be good. So, a couple just real brief announcement. You guys know that we have a ministry every Sunday. I always say this in the message or before the message. I say, all right, kids, you can head down to Kids Quest. And I'm going to do that in just a second. But, ministry like that is always changing. It's changing in Howell. I just talked about this down in Howell this morning. There are people who serve in that ministry. They teach, and they'll do that for, sometimes for years. And people sometimes, get through a couple years of that, and they want to either take a break or they want to transition into some other ministry. What that means is that we need other people to step into that place to help. And this summer, I think our schedule is pretty well set. But come fall, we're going to have some openings again. I'm going to challenge you guys to begin thinking and praying about whether or not God would want you to help in that area. Now, some of you might be sitting there going, I've never taught. I don't know anything about kids. I'm just going to tell you, starting in the fall, we're going to be offering some training on how we actually do this. How do we actually teach kids? And so that is coming. And so if you're sitting here and if you've been a Christian for like 10 years, you already have what you need to teach. Okay? You've got the tools. We just need to show you how to use them. And so we're going to do that. But I want you to begin thinking and praying about whether or not God would have you help with our kids ministry and help with our nursery. Okay? Because there are babies coming. All right? So I'm just going to do this. Jody's really good at this, so I'm going to take a page out of her playbook. How many of you right now will commit by a raised hand and say, yes, Chris, I will pray right now, begin praying about whether or not God would have me serve in one of those two ministries? How many of you will pray over this summer about that? Okay. Thank you. Cool. It's amazing. Yeah. Yes, I need that. I need that instant gratification. All right, cool. Because we guys, we're what we're going to talk about today is part of this, but we're moving ahead as a church, and we're going to have kids here, we're going to have babies here, and we need to take care of them. All right, so I'm going to let the kids head out to Kids Quest. So if you're 5th grade down and you're to 5 years old, you can go to Kids Quest and head down with Miss Danielle. Oh, and then one thing, just a reminder, youth group starts tonight at 6:30 right here, and that's gonna be the first 2 Sundays of every month for the summer. All right, so that'll start tonight at 6:30. All right, so kids are gone. We're gonna play a video here about church planting. All right, let's take a look.
Something new has begun, with churches represented all across America. In faith, we are believing God to do more than we can ask or think. As we look coast to coast at the faithful leaders of the Converge movement, what will God do? How will He move in a new and fresh way? What is the potential for lives to be changed? And for God to be magnified like never before? To reach more people with the gospel, Converge churches have committed to plant 15 new churches in the Northeast, 30 in the Mid-Atlantic, 60 in Mid-America, 50 in North Central, 7 in Heartland, 25 in the Great Lakes, 15 in Rocky Mountain, 25 in the Northwest, 25 in the Pac West, 35 in the Southwest, and 25 new church plants in the Southeast. That's 312 new churches from coast to coast by 2026. If each of these churches grew to only 200 people, that would be over 60,000 lives impacted. New churches reach new people in new ways. Let's start something new.
And we are affiliated with Converge. That's who we serve with, and we're part of that 312 churches that our goal is to plant those by 2026. That's ambitious. Some of those are currently being planted. But that's what we're talking about today. That's the whole message is gonna center on that because, as it said there, church planting, it reaches new people. Some of you are here right now in this building because God moved in myself and Jody to come here and plant a brand new church. And some of you were saved, came to know Jesus as a result of the ministry of this church. And some of you have come from other churches and stuff, but this wouldn't be here were it not for Converge and their efforts and us, listening to the call of God. So we're going to talk about that throughout our time together. Have you noticed how strongly the world markets comfort? They market comfort. Life is hard, and so the world sells us what will make it easier, what will make us more comfortable. I mean, how many times when you open, a newspaper, or you're watching a TV ad, or you're flipping through a magazine or whatever, how many times do you see the word comfort in the ads? Because they're always selling comfort. Comfortable shoes, comfortable pillows, comfortable socks, comfortable mattresses, furniture, heating and cooling, keep you comfortable this summer with the air conditioning or whatever. We love our creature comforts, and we love comfort so much that we have a name for the place we are most at peace. It's called our comfort zone, right? We have an area, we have a zone of comfort. And so when something threatens to take us out of our comfort zone, we get uncomfortable. We don't like that. But sometimes God calls us to step out of that place of comfort and find a new zone, the faith zone, which doesn't quite have the same ring to it, but it's much better than the comfort zone. It's a better place. And God has been calling his people to go for 2,000 years, and that often means leaving the comfort zone. And so that's why when we're talking about this whole church planting thing, when we're talking about, and it's not just that, when we talk about anything that God is telling us to do, when he says go, we can't say no. When he says go, we can't say no. Now, going could mean different things to each of us, okay? For Jody and myself, when we heard go, it meant move, pick up our family, leave our jobs in New York, leave the church there, and come and start something new here. That's what go meant for us. But it could mean something different to everyone, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But when God says go, we've got to go. We can't say no, and we, for some reason, get really good at coming up with excuses as to why we can't leave our comfort zone. We're very good at this. When God first began moving in me to plant a church, my thought was, well, church planting is for guys that no one else would hire. They go start a church because no one else would hire them, or they got fired, or whatever. I thought, I'm not going to start something from scratch. That's too hard. That's way too hard. Or I'm bad at fundraising. I don't know how to ask people for money to help with this church thing, or I'm not really an evangelist, I don't really have that gift or whatever. I had all these excuses, and for a lot of us, when God begins to nudge and try to get us to move, we wrestle with similar fears and questions. We are uncertain about what he's asking. It looks really big to us. So the key question a lot of us ask is, what is this going to cost me? Like, what is the personal cost to me if I'm going to obey God? Because every time you say yes to God, it usually means you got to sacrifice something else. But when it comes to even like if we're talking about a church plant, we go, what is it going to cost us? Do we have the right leaders? Do we have enough money? And it's I don't, or I can't. Have you thought about the ramifications of saying yes to God versus saying no? Have you ever thought that through? I want you to go to Deuteronomy chapter 1 in your Bibles, and I want to look at a circumstance where we can clearly see the ramifications of saying yes versus saying no to God. We're going to pick up in a story here where a whole generation dies in the desert because a few people chose to say no when God said go. So while you're turning there, and I am going to put it up here as well, but if you want to turn there, I just want to encourage you to be open to God and what he's saying to you today, and just just commit today just to be open to what God is doing, okay? All right, so in Deuteronomy, people are like, what does that mean? It really just means second law. This is kind of like the second time Moses is presenting the law. He's gathered the people on the plains of Moab, which is just across the Jordan River, okay? So if you just your Middle East geography, you've got the Mediterranean Sea, you've got Israel right next to it, and then the Jordan River runs along here, okay? So they're just on the other side of that. And he's got them gathered there. They were just slaves 40 years ago, okay? And they've wandered all that time, and now Moses is addressing him. And the whole book of Deuteronomy is basically 3 long sermons and 2 really long poems that review the law and remind the people of God's promises. So let's take a look, verse 1. These are the words that Moses spoke to all Israel beyond the Jordan in the wilderness, in the Arabah opposite Zuph, between Paran and Tophel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizahab. Now, they're in the wilderness, okay? They're in this wilderness on the other side of the Jordan. They're not in the land. And I don't know if you've ever felt this, but God, I think, sometimes speaks in the wilderness. When you're in a place, you're a little bit lost, you're not really sure, God sometimes speaks to us there. I know when I was early in ministry here, I thought I had something to prove. I thought that the size of this church was a measurement of my success or failure. And for a while there, I was a little lost. I wasn't sure, what I was doing, what God was doing. And in that place where I was just really kind of lost and confused, that's when I heard God kind of whisper to me, it's not about you. And I needed that. I needed him to speak that to me. I couldn't hear that up until then, but when I was walking these streets and praying and just like frustrated and Lord, what's going on, that's when he chose to say that. So maybe you have been there as well. All right, verse 2. It's 11 days' journey from Horeb by way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses spoke to the people of Israel according to all that the Lord had given him in commandment to them. After he had defeated Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth and in Edrei. So, I don't know if you caught that in verse 2, but it says that the mountain they were at, getting the law from God, from there to the land that God had promised them, would have taken 11 days. 11 days. If you go to a map of the Middle East, you can see like where they were at in Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea, and they went to the mountain of God, and they got the law and everything. And then from there would have been 11 days. A stroll, really. Just a little walk. But what should have taken 11 days, well, now they're standing here listening to Moses at a point 40 years later. 11 days, 40 years. If you're going on a trip, you generally want to go in a straight line from point A to point B. I read a story this week about a group of college students. They were going to go to spring break down in Florida. They were so excited. They jumped in the van, and they headed out, and they were in South Carolina. So not that far, right, to Florida. Well, when they passed the North Carolina-Virginia border, they realized they had driven like 7 hours in the wrong direction. And, yeah, had to turn around. They definitely took the long route. And that's what happened to Israel. Something that shouldn't take that long ended up taking a lot longer. And so the question I have for you is, what in your life has been your 40 years? Because all of us knew of something we were supposed to do, and we could have probably done it in a short period of time, but because life and circumstances and sometimes our own disobedience, it ended up taking a lot longer. And you guys know what that is. You have a goal, you have a direction, but you find in your life you're going around the same old mountains, the same old issues, the same old thing. And I wonder how much of our Christian life is spent wandering around, traversing the same mountain over and over, and what should take 11 days ends up taking 40 years. You know, it can happen with your career. It can happen in raising your kids. It can happen in your marriage. We keep retreading the same ground, going over the same things over and over again. And you know what? It can happen with the church too. There's a lot of churches that are stuck. They're stalled because they are like the people of Israel. Just keep going over the same ground. Questions they keep asking over and over. I know we've been there as a church too. Sometimes thinking, nobody's going to buy into the vision here. Or we keep asking, how do we get more people in fuel groups? How do we get more people to give? How do we get more people to serve? How do we really disciple people to follow Jesus? Can we actually reach non-Christians here? And we just keep going over that over and over and over again, and 11 days turns into 40 years of wandering and wondering. Let's keep going. Deuteronomy, verse 5. Beyond the Jordan in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to explain this law, saying, "The Lord our God said to us in Horeb, you have stayed long enough at this mountain. Turn and take your journey and go to the hill country of the Amorites and to all their neighbors in the Arabah, in the hill country, in the lowland, and in the Negeb, and by the sea coast, the land of the Canaanites, and Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates." So he's telling the people, this is what God is saying. And he uses the phrase beyond the Jordan, emphasizing the fact they haven't gotten to the promised land yet. It's been 40 years, and they're still on the other side of the Jordan. And then he adds, you've stayed long enough at this mountain. Moses is relating to the people. He's saying, guys, God is saying, we're done here. We've been here long enough. It's time to move. And after all they've been through, it was time to move forward. No more circles, no more wandering. Go where I told you to go. And I know that in our lives, we've had past victories. A lot of us have had victories. We've had losses. And we can look back and admire the faith of the past and the work of the past, and that's okay. But I think God is saying to some of you here today, you've stayed here long enough at that mountain. Enough wandering, enough of whatever you're doing right now. It is time to move forward. Whatever's got you stalled, whatever's got you paused, stuck, or in the wilderness, it's time to move past that and move forward. Time to move on. That goes for us individually. It goes for us as a church. And see, what the people didn't comprehend at that moment fully is that they were about to enter this place of goodness and blessing. And this was a different group that started the journey, okay? All the people that came out of slavery, out of Egypt, and crossed the Red Sea, and they saw the waters parted, and they ate the manna off the ground, and the quail, and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, some of those people are here, but those original ones that came out of Egypt, they were all gone. They all died in that wilderness. And now God is here 40 years later going, hey, you guys have been here long enough. It is time to see this generation. Are you going to make the same mistake as your parents? They were stuck in this 40-year rut, and now it was time to go, time to break camp and advance. And God disrupted their normal. He stepped in and disrupted their routine. When God steps in and says it's time to move, it does break things up a little bit. It breaks our routines. It breaks our feelings of comfort. You know, that comfort zone gets shattered. And it hurts a little bit. Sometimes moving into something new can hurt. It's exciting, but it can hurt too. You ever break anything? Break a bone? That's painful. I broke my pinky once. I know, yeah. I was a youth pastor, and we were playing with those like squishy, like almost like reusable water balloon kind of things. It's basically just a ball of sponge with a cover on it. And this kid threw it at me, and it just hooked my pinky and just, yeah, it hurt. Anyway, I never went to the doctor. I went home going, man, my finger really hurts. And for months, I had to baby it, and I never even taped it to the other finger, to keep it stable. I just, lived with the pain. If I'd gone to the doctor, he could have put in some sort of splint. It would have healed faster, but I just suffered with it. And the same thing is true when God interrupts our lives and says it's time to move. It can hurt because it breaks something about what we're doing at the moment to change it. And we can just, complain about it, or we can recognize that we've been attached to the familiar. We've been attached too long to the routine and to the comfort zone and begin to lower our resistance to change. We're not really different than the people of Israel in that regard. Okay, we're a lot like them. So God says, I just brought you out of 430 years of slavery. I brought you out of this land. And what was supposed to be an 11-day journey through the wilderness turned into 40 years. What happened? Well, later in this chapter, we're not going to get that far, but at the end of chapter 1, Moses says, I sent 12 of your leaders to the land to check it out. You guys know the story, right? They went into the land. They looked at it. They came back. 10 of them came back going, those people are huge. I mean, you should see them. They're giants. There's no way we could defeat them. And I mean, their morals, their political life, their social life, all that is just so messed up. They're so horrible. No way. There's no way we can go and beat them. And only two guys, Joshua and Caleb, they're the only two to step up in front of the people and go, hey, what are you talking about? Like, we don't live out of fear. God has told us to go. Let's go. Let's get in the land. We can do it. But you know what? It only took 10 people with a negative report to change the destiny of over 1 million people. The destiny that God had for them to enter that land was taken away, was delayed because of 10 negative people. Now, God had to take them to the wilderness. He had to do some shaping in that wilderness. Not every wilderness experience is from the devil, okay? Sometimes God's got to take us through the wilderness. And a preacher that I admire, he put it this way. He says, sometimes the shortest distance between 2 points is a zigzag. So 11 days, that's all it would have taken. But because they had just come out of Egypt, God had to get the Egypt out of them, right? So they came out of slavery, but they were still thinking and acting like slaves. And so God had to work to remove their past and kind of give them this new life and this new understanding. And I'll tell you, the longer you stay somewhere, the longer you stay comfortable, the harder it is to accept change. And some of you are in a place right now, you're comfortable, you're just, I like where I'm at, but God wants to do something in you. So there might be a break, something might hurt. He's going to move you out of that comfort zone. You know, when we break camp, kind of like the Israelites, they had to change their mindset and their expectations. They were camped at different places for a long time. They probably got used to getting up every morning and going, where's the cloud? Where's the pillar of fire? You know, and setting up the tabernacle. And they did that. They would camp out, and then they'd get up, and they'd go to another place. And God was just leading them around. And they just got accustomed to that. Now, I know some of you are like, I am not a camper, so, you know, I don't really think setting up a tent every night is a lot of fun. I don't think I could get used to that, but these people did. Some of those tent pegs probably got driven into the ground, and they were pretty hard to get out, I'm sure. They got comfortable. And so the question is, like the Israelites, do you need to be shaken out of your settledness? Are you a comfortable Christian? You say, is that a trick question? I would say there's nothing less effective for God than a comfortable Christian surrounded by a comfortable church. See, that's why we're in this passage on the week that we're talking about church planting, because I believe God's calling us to get uncomfortable. And when he says go, when he says it's time to get uncomfortable, what we do from that point on matters. What we teach matters. What we put out on the internet, what we tweet, what we put on social media, matters. And you can be a part of the negativity, the naysaying, the doom and gloom conversation of, oh, God's telling us to do this, but there's no way. You can be a part of that group of 10, okay? Or you can be part of the conversation that's life-giving and inspires love and hope and opportunity and calls people to obedience. Again, 10 people was all it took to influence over 1 million. What would it take in a church our size? A lot less than 10. So, let's go back to Deuteronomy chapter 1. Look at verse 8. He says, see, I have set the land before you. Go in and take possession of the land that the Lord swore to your forefathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give to them and to their offspring after them. Moses is relaying God's words. He says, go and take possession. God says go, and when he says go, we can't say no. We need to go. And you know, some of us might say, well, I don't really feel like, Chris, if you're saying that I'm the one that should go and plant a church, I'm not saying that. Some of us need to go, and some of us need to help those that are called to actually go. But the point is that we're all in motion. Okay, in a church, nobody should be standing on the sidelines going, well, I'm just going to check this out and see. No, we're all called to be in on it. Now, why does this matter right now? I mean, why are we talking about this now? Well, there are a lot of excuses when people hear about church planting, a lot of arguments, a lot of myths about church planting. And I'll just tell you, this is something I've been praying about before we started this church. I always prayed that we would be a multiplying church. And I feel like we have finally come to the point where that's possible, and I feel like God is moving us in this direction. So let's talk about some of the myths. There's 5 myths, I think, surrounding church planting. There's probably more, but I'm going to just deal with these today. One of the first things that you'll hear people say when you tell them they're going to plant a church is they'll go, ooh, that's going to hurt the parent church, the mother church. That's going to hurt. It's not true, though. It sounds good in a meeting. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, we don't want to damage the church. Listen, what you find is that when churches give birth to another church, they actually have kind of a season of vitality afterward. Like God restores. He honors the giving and brings in new leaders, raises up people who have been waiting for an opportunity to serve. We get blessed when we're a blessing. And the statistics, like you saw Converge, the video and everything, they've watched over the years. They've been dentists for a long time. They've watched over the years as, and this is just statistically, okay, churches that plant grow faster than those that do not. They just do. Second myth, planting hurts existing churches. People are like, oh, well, if you plant a church, you're gonna like suck up all the sheep from the other churches, and you're gonna hurt other churches in your area. Listen, there are some churches that actually make that their goal, and I think that's wrong. I don't think that's biblical. But generally speaking, when a new church comes into an area, there's a standard or quality of ministry that they bring that actually kind of raises the level of ministry everywhere. Planting, when a new church comes into town, all the existing churches kind of look and go, what are they doing? And they go, we better sharpen up. Like, let's up our ministry edge, if you will, And new churches are always looking to reach the unchurched. And we need new churches to reach them. So there's no damage to existing churches unless somebody's out to do that. And in that case, I don't think that's a move of God. Here's the third myth. Some people say, there's really no room for another church in our area. We heard that when we moved here. They're like, Fenton? There's like a church on every corner in Fenton. Most new churches are reaching out to completely different groups of people. They're not reaching the same people every other church is reaching. Again, they're reaching unchurched people. And the ministry style, the worship of a new church is going to be different from existing churches. Listen, let's just, for example, say that every church in this area, we could assign like the name of a soda pop. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that church, they're Coke. That church is Sprite. That church is 7-Up. RC Cola is over there down the street. You know what the road is? Some of you heard me say it before. Rock and Rye. Okay? We're not like other churches. We're not. I'm not like other pastors. I'm weird. Okay? But that's how this works. When a new church is birthed, it's different. It's just going to be different. We don't do cookie cutter stuff. God doesn't do cookie cutter stuff. Here's a fourth myth here, that we're just too small. We're just too small. I've heard people even say this to me like, oh, well, if we just give away a bunch of people to go start something new, then the church that's here is just going to die. Listen, a lot of small churches have successfully helped start new churches. And sometimes several small ones can actually partner together in starting a new one. And we've actually got two already. We got one in Howell, one here. We can work together. And it's not strange at all for a parent church to replace the people they sent out and actually grow by 10% within a year's time. It just, again, they've watched this happen over and over again. Large churches sometimes have a hard time getting people to get up and go because they do get kind of comfortable. Smaller churches seem to be more adept at planting in general. But here's the thing. This is so much, I want you to hear this. This is so much more important than the size of the church. You know what's more important than the size of the church? The heart for mission in the people. That's the difference. Okay? So if the heart for mission is there, it doesn't matter what size the church is. Here's the fifth myth, that America is over-churched. We could probably double the number of churches in America and still not be close to meeting the current needs. The population is growing exponentially faster than we are currently adding new churches. Let's just say, for example, we add 1,000 churches a year. Do you know how many churches close in a year? It's over 3,000. So even if we're planting 1,000 churches a year and we keep closing over 3,000 a year, it's a net loss over and over and over again. America's not over-churched. In fact, this one's even more shocking. Less than 18% of Americans attend church on any given Sunday. We'll just round up to 20%. Let's say 20% of the population's in church on Sunday. Guys, that's a ton of people who are unchurched, doing who knows what on Sunday morning. We're not over-churched. There is a need for people to hear the gospel. I want to show you this picture. I mean, you guys know everybody in this picture. Oh yeah, right there. That's our family, right? Except we're about to add someone new this week to our family. Elise on the end there. She's not here right now. They were here a minute ago. But when you multiply your family, whether it's adding a daughter by marriage or a baby comes into the family, it brings a new dynamic. There's a new joy. There's an excitement. There's an energy. The focus of that family changes for a time. It happens in churches or in small groups, like if a new believer comes into a Sunday service or you have a new person come into your fuel group, like the dynamic shifts a little bit and the energy and the focus of the group shifts a little bit. And new churches have that same ability to be planted in a community and to change the focus and change just what's happening in that community. I think it's important to understand, one American denomination, they did a study, and they found that 80% of their new converts, like people coming to faith in Jesus, 80% of them came to know Jesus through churches that were less than 2 years old. 80% of the people that were saved in their denomination, it was in churches less than 2 years old. I feel like God is telling us as a group of churches that the time is now, that more church planting is needed. And, he's basically saying, I've set the land before you. It's time to break camp and advance. And if God says go, we can't say no. This is another statistic that's really shocking. Only 4% of churches in America ever reproduce. The number of churches that are actually planting other churches is so small. Now, sometimes it happens through organizations and groups, like, they might just come to Converge and plant and not have a church that's actually duplicating itself. But only 4% ever reproduce. Because starting new churches is hard. To do it, the people there need to be willing to go to a new land, do something new, go to territory they've never been in. And it's going to require more sacrifice. Every time there's a new church birth, it requires sacrifice. Now listen, we're not planting a church next month or anything. But there are steps that we need to take as individuals and as a church to prepare for a move of God, because you don't like just sit back and God starts doing something and then you try to run to catch up. Okay? What we want to do is ask God, where are you moving, so we can already be there and join you in that. So what can you do? In the next 30 days, you can identify a person that God might be putting on your heart, and then make a commitment to talk to that person about Jesus. I'm not making you have a list of 7 people. We've done that before, but I'm saying just, is there one person? And what I mean is there a person that you think about in your life that you say, you know what, maybe I have invited them here, maybe I haven't, but they might be the very person that we're talking about here. When we talk about planting a new church, they might be the person that would fit perfectly in that new place. So begin with prayer. And let's just do this for a second. As you sit there in your seat, let's just take I'm going to give you just a few seconds. I want you to just, if you need to close your eyes for a minute to visualize their face, take a couple seconds and just get a person in your mind. Identify a person that you say, I need to share Christ with them. I need to begin praying for them. Now, if you have someone in your mind, God brought someone to your mind, I want you to, today, sometime after the service, tell someone about it so that you have some accountability, and ask that person to remind you. Okay? So identify that person. The second thing you need to do, once you've got that person in your mind, is initiate. Go across your yard, go across your street, go across town, whoever this person is. Take whatever step you need to take in order to initiate something with them. I don't know if you know this, But 79% of unchurched people will engage in a conversation about faith with you if you ask. So the person you have in your mind, the person that you've envisioned, if you go initiate something with them, you have a 4 out of 5 chance that they'll talk back with you and share spiritual thoughts. That's good odds. Okay? So identify, initiate, start something. Just start the conversation and point it toward Christ. And then in the next 30 days, invite. Be brave. Be courageous. Invite someone to church. And that statistic there, the odds aren't as good, but 25% of people said they would attend church if they were invited. The odds, I think, go up if you're already in a spiritual conversation with them. Those are just 3 simple things you guys can do as we prepare for this move of God, and it is coming. I know I'm going to be gone this summer, but a lot of what I'm going to be talking to God about and just thinking about is going to be this. What's next? So we're going to have to rely more on God's power. We are. We're going to have to rely on him to do a lot of this. And I think we need to pray together and ask God to unleash a movement unlike anything we've seen before, and then say, God, would you let us be a small part of that? If God says go, we can't say no. All right, I want to play the second video for you, and then you got one more song? Okay. All right, let's play this video.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are the waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are.
lead us in this last song. It said something there about a launch offering. We're not taking a special offering today because this church has already given over $10,000 to church planting over the last 2.5 years through our Roots to Branches campaign. We're already in it, whether you knew you were on it and on board with it or not. We've already been giving money to church planting. But when we talk about what we can do here, I'm talking about a church plant that we together, along with Howell, come together on, that we send people out and we plant a church. We don't know entirely what it looks like. We don't know where it's going to be. We don't know any of those things. But I need you to pray with me that God leads us and shows us where it's supposed to be, so that when he says go, we can't say no. We're on board. All right?